Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Young Guy International Podcast. Another guest, another great conversation that we're about to have. Today with me, I have an interesting guest. But before I get into that, I want to thank you all for watching all the previous episodes that we've had, engaging, commenting, sharing it. It's been very helpful. I want to pray. We want to ask that you continue to do so. Ask that you continue to share this. And in today's episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, please share, subscribe, comment. If you're listening to this, continue listening, continue sharing it. Today with me, I'm happy to say that I have a great guest. He is not just a founder and president of Mapkot Technologies, he's also a doctoral student here at the University of Waterloo. And today we're going to learn about his journey. We're going to talk to him about innovation, things regarding youth empowerment, youth entrepreneurship in the Waterloo ecosystem, but also globally. He has a great startup that we're going to talk about that started off in Ghana, but is now creating great strides here in North America, but globally as well. Today with me, I'm happy to have Kwaku. Thank you very much, Kwaku, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Darren, for making time and giving me this opportunity. And thank you for, meeting everyone and also the guests and the viewers out there.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming. What I've been doing for majority of the Young Guy International is, because it is an international podcast, because our goal here is to create the socially connected world by tapping into culture and entrepreneurship of the guests. I usually ask my guests to teach us a phrase or a word in their local language of heritage, or a word or phrase that they learned in their journey in entrepreneurship that can allow us to ground this conversation, but also tap into your culture as we get into. So I'll hand it over to you to teach us something that we can use to break the ice today.
Sounds good, Darren. Thanks so much. So there is actually a popular adage in my local language in Ghana, and it simply goes, I'll actually translate it, so don't worry. It goes that, dear ofru eduapad na ye piano. Now, what it means is that he who climbs the right tree gets the most support. So, in essence, there are people who take initiatives. And so, locally, we always admire people who take leadership, people who take, roles to lead. But then our forefathers understood that there are some paths that are not right. And so if you are able to make the right decision or follow the right path, you attract people, you attract support, you attract resources. And that has been one of the things that I always run with, that at the end of the day, the value of whatever you do technically speaks for you. If you're doing something right, you're always going to get people to support you. And that is why I'm always happy with the team and the kind of, people that are always around me. I am who I am today, not because of me, but also because of the great support with my family, with my friends, with, back at home. How we even started this journey, or my entrepreneurial journey, has been people who mentored me, people who supported me throughout that. And that clearly, goes with that adage that he who climbs the right tree gets the support that he deserves. So it just to set the tone that if you are technically reaching for something impactful in society, you don't need to talk much. You don't need to do much. All you need to do is just focus on the drive and move towards it. You get people to support you. I mean, when people like Aliko Dangote, when people like Jeff Bezos, when people like Bill Gates, and all these people that are the titans when it comes to the business world, when they started, I mean, they couldn't get to where they are because of, their just by telling people that, hey, this is what I do, right? There was an evidence. And these people saw the impact that they were making. People saw the track record of whatever that they were doing. And that was what attracted support. So it is really important that whatever, as entrepreneurs and as young people, whatever journey that we sort of position ourselves to follow or to take as a path, we need to understand the relevance of making it right. And if it is done right, you will definitely get the right support. Yeah.
So in essence, from that analogy, if you climb the right tree, you will get the right support. If you don't climb the right tree initially, you will get the support, but it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. Now, circling back on that, because I like that analogy, for someone who's watching, how do you know that this is the right tree that I'm climbing?
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple to know the whether you're following the right tree or not. And number one is value. You see, sometimes we really don't understand the difference between value and passion. You can be passionate about so many things, but at the end of the day, what is the value of that? You find someone being passionate of being an engineer, for example, and someone being passionate about music or passionate about soccer or passionate about, whatever. And there's so many things that motivate us to do whatever we do. Now, at the end of the day, if whatever that you are doing is bringing value to society, is bringing some bit of impact, positive impact to society, then you are on the right path. It is not set in stone to have a particular metrics, but then it is essentially what makes the society better, what makes life better, what makes, things easier, what conserves the environment. So, for example, if about 20 years ago, we didn't have the smartphone, and then somebody came up with the idea of a smartphone. Now, the idea of having a smartphone wasn't to generate money at the beginning. The idea of the smartphone was to make life easier for people. That is where you need to understand whether you're doing something right or something wrong. When electricity was discovered, when Tesla, was working on this tirelessly, the goal wasn't to be rich. The goal was to make life easier for people. And so that brings me to innovation. Sometimes I think people misconstrue what innovation means, and people think that innovation is simply just technology tools and stuff like that. No. But then innovation is anything that makes life easier and in a very positive way for people. It's more or less like when people create nuclear weapons. At the end of the day, it's a technology, it's an innovation, but then see the end goal. It ends up in something wrong. Initially, people used to like, nuclear weapons, and it used to have a lot of traction. People were happy with it. But then when people saw the destruction that can bring, now you find people even being ashamed to talk about nuclear weapons. So they were climbing the tree, but then people realized that wasn't a good tree to support. That wasn't a right path to support, right? So now you find people rerouting that same technology into energy. People are using nuclear energy to power homes, to power cars, to power so many other things, unlike using it for war or using it as a weapon and all that. So that is a clear example of following a path that makes meaning or brings meaning to the society at large, and following the path that at the end of the day just brings distraction. These are two sides, and you can clearly it doesn't need any book. It is always clear. It is always clear. You can always tell when your path or your innovation will literally impact the world or your locality or wherever you are positively or negatively. So it's up to you to sometimes, if like to the viewers out there, sometimes you may find yourself in a path where you may not necessarily be making a direct impact to, your locality or wherever you are. But then if it's by extension follows to also support other people, that is also a right path. You might not necessarily be the lead in everything. Sometimes you can be a support, and that alone is also a very good path. Yeah.
That makes sense now that we clearly understand the two. And you mentioned something interesting about innovation being created, or essentially the way you look at it as something to help people. I've seen in your work, and now we're going to talk a little bit about Mapkot Technologies and how you've helped, farmers in Ghana. Tell us about sort of the reason behind Mapcot Technologies and why, you see it as something that was necessary to help farmers.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. I normally summarize that in two things: the reality I had, and then the reality that I wanted to change. That was what motivated me to start this, and I'll break it down a bit. So the reality I had was that growing up, I was raised by my parents, my mom and my dad. But then my dad passed quite a long time ago when I was in high school. And my mom used to work a lot with farmers. So she was a food trader working with farmers and selling the commodities out there. Now, there were times that I used to go with her when I was on break. So sometimes when I break from school for long breaks, I used to go to the market and actually sell with her. So I had a lot of customers at the time who really liked me because they always want to see me at the market selling to them. And my mom took me to some of these farmers to also see them. And at the time, as a very young guy, one of the problems I saw was how the heroes of what we eat were literally begging. So you find farmers, you find these people are the ones that at the end of the day help us survive. But then they were at the mercy of the weather, they were at the mercy of prices, they were at the mercy of their product being perished and all that because of, post-harvest losses. So right from that young age, I kind of witnessed how the agriculture sector was literally being seen as a very low income generating, industry right from the start. And by extension, were the worst invested industry across the globe. So that gave me that motivation that, hey, if we are able to transform the lives of these people, would it make a mark? And then, so right from school, I had the opportunity of working with tech products. So I was a lover of IT and technology right from childhood. So I used to code with friends. I used to, do a lot of engineering stuff and so all along, my goal was how I can be able to channel that same energy to support, such industry that it is technically overlooked by so many people across the globe. So that was the reality that I was faced.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Right from childhood, working with these farmers, seeing how they were struggling and seeing even the kind of challenges that they were, the industry was facing. Now, fast forward, I had my education and I worked in the mining sector and then in consulting for a while. And somehow within that same space, I was working with farmers. And from a different angle, I was sort of helping with compensation plans, trying to support farmers, trying to help, these companies to compensate the farmers right. But then it seemed like I was supporting from a distance. So one thing that sort of challenged me was a day that I was working with this Swiss Ghanaian company in the cocoa sector, and they were trying to transform the sector to make sure that payments are traceable. So then I proposed an idea where we're going to use blockchain technology to support the payment of these farmers. So I led that initiative, and then they were really interested in that. We tested it out with the farmers, but then the farmers rejected it, which was interesting because I felt like, look, I'm fighting for you guys. So why are you not interested in it? So it really made me sort of understand, okay, what could really be the challenge? So then I actually stayed in the village for about 3 to 6 months. I ate their food, drank their water, tried to understand their lifestyle. Then I got the clue. Then I understood why they had to reject it. And there were two things. Number one was the fact that most of them were not enthused with digital banking because at the time there was a tax element to every digital transaction that you do. So most of them will prefer cash because that percentage of tax that may technically not be enough, or maybe like chicken change for most people, most average people, to the farmer is significant. It can actually afford him a 2 square meal a day. So he wouldn't want to sacrifice that for just having it on his phone. He'd rather prefer to get his cash and then get it in full. So that was one thing I learned. The second thing was about their culture and understanding their life in terms of what works for them. So most of the farmers are not against technology, but then they are against, I call, responsible technology. And in this case, responsible technology is making sure that it is user-friendly and making sure that it is designed with them. So that challenged me to go back to the drawing board and then redesign the technology or redesign the system to embrace the farmers. So I went, sat with them, took their kids and then some of their family members who had been to tertiary, sat down with them to sort of connect with them and understand in their language because they understood where I was coming from. And then we came together and then designed the system. In this case, the farmers felt part of it. The farmers felt that, look, this is something that is in our language, is in our culture. You know, we describe this as this and not that. So we kind of eliminated all the Western diction, all the Western languages, all the Western ways of doing, that building that technology. And it really gave me a different perspective when it comes to designing digital products or designing technologies or innovations in the first place. So we were successful. And then till date, the company still uses the system. Farmers get the right compensation for every cocoa product or cocoa beans that they sell to this company. So it was through that, learning all that and getting that experience that I decided to go with what we designed, the product Mapmate. So then Mapmate came out of that idea. So Mapmate is essentially a digital tool also that connects these food companies to farmers. Now, the major problem that these food companies face, which sometimes is not really their fault, is being internationally compliant and then being, making sure that their raw materials or their operations are traced effectively. So, for example, if you buy a bar of chocolate here, ideally, you are supposed to have like a QR code on the bar of chocolate. You can scan it with your phone and it should tell you where those products are coming from, where the main ingredient, which is the cocoa, is coming from. And by extension, it should even tell you which farmers gave you or put their cocoa beans together to give you that kind of that bar of chocolate. That is the challenge of most companies, whether coffee or grains or cereal or whatever. The major problem is the difficulty and complexity of tracing the raw materials right at the last mile. And that is what Mapmate tries to do. So Mapmate leverages on both on both internet and non-internet sources to bridge the gap of communication and traceability for these companies.
So it's the traceability between the company, consumer, and farmer. Are those the three main stakeholders, or is it company that is purchasing directly from farmer?
Yes, that's a good question. So for us, the companies deal with their consumers independently. We don't come in between that because that is a different process. But then our main focus is communication directly between the companies and then the farmers. Because most of the companies want to understand the production and operations of their suppliers, which are the farmers. But then most of the time, it is difficult. I mean, in Africa alone, only 38% or less are online. If you if you look at the internet statistics in Africa, it's only 38%, as compared to North America, which is like 98 or 97%. Europe is like 96 or 97, right? I mean, you could see the sharp contrast between such continents and then Africa. So, but then invariably, the raw materials are actually coming from Africa. So it's more or less like being in the dark of being a company who is buying or acquiring your raw materials from another planet, sort of. It kind of makes it difficult to track what is happening. All that you get to know is that, okay, it is in your warehouse at the factory. It has been shipped there. You are going to mail it and then come up with your finished product. So it makes it difficult to tell even your production outcomes. So sometimes most companies face problems of having uncertainties in their production volumes. Today they get, let's say, 100 metric tons. Tomorrow it can fall down to, say, 20, or it can go up to, say, 200. It makes it difficult to plan or forecast, your production costs, how much revenue you should expect, how much energy you should use, So it's like that's, at the end of the day, you just get different figures all the time. You're not able to really predict what you should expect. And that is bad for business, because at the end of the day, it really makes you suffer in terms of how to hire even people. Are you over hiring? Are you under hiring? Are you overproducing? Are you underproducing? So all these things are the headaches of the companies. The second thing is when it comes to compliance, in the food business or the food manufacturing business, it's almost a 10 trillion market. Now, it's huge. They make a lot of revenue. The chocolate industry alone makes about $100 billion a year. Just the chocolate industry. Now come to coffee, come to shea, come to grains. I mean, it's a huge market. But then the main problem is that they face compliance issues. They face a lot of lawsuits because their chain is very complex. So recently, I think a year or two ago, Cargill, which is it's an American company that they kind of deal with various cocoa products, shea products, beverages, etc., was sued in Brazil by a non-governmental organization who, I think they are an environmental organization. And apparently, they were suing Cargill because some of their farmers were farming in the Amazon. Now, this is a very sensitive biodiversity area where there are a lot of species at risk. There are a lot of species that are going extinct, etc. And so a lot of people are watching that conservative or that conservatory, right? But then somehow, although some of like the Cargill company had no clue, some claim that they had no clue, but it could be possible because they deal with a lot of middlemen. They deal with a lot of people along the chain.
Supply chains.
The supply chains are really complex. So they might not even be aware that some of the farmers go into these areas to harvest some of the raw materials, or some of them even go to, farm in these areas. So at the end of the day, somehow maybe they won the lawsuit. I don't know. But then this is just one out of so many lawsuits. Some companies like Cadbury, Barry Callebaut, Mondelez have been sued for child labor and all that. Because some of the farmers back home in Africa use their kids on the farm, which is somehow debatable. Some people say that they are just teaching them, the work on the field, etc. Just like the way the ordinary Western person will also take his kid on the tractor on the farm and all that. But I mean, that is still debatable. At the end of the day, the problem is that they want to understand the operations at the last mile. And because of internet connectivity, it makes it tough to reach these people. Sometimes they want to share latest resources, like weather forecasts, like the latest pesticides, fertilizers, etc. Like all these things that may make the farmer more better in terms of their decision making. These are all things that they want to help with the farmers, but then it is difficult to reach them. It is difficult to communicate with them. The farmers will also want to share what they are facing, the challenges they are facing on ground, and all these things have been mostly tied to the traditional approach where they use, sometimes they go to the farmers to do survey or they use papers to sort of record what is happening, etc.
But those are outdated.
Exactly. So, but all that data is sort of difficult to track. So at the end of the day, there are lots of reliable information lost along the chain because someone goes to the farm to collect the information, brings it to the nearest village, aggregates it from multiple farmers, brings it to the nearest village. Now the person from the village will have to go to maybe the community or the central community to also share with another person. Now that person will then now take it to the city to share with, those are the head office of the company, the local head office of the company. And then that has to also go to, the region in Africa, then maybe goes to maybe Europe, wherever, So the chain is quite long, So what we basically do is that we tap into the satellite and radio resources, use SMS and text in the languages of the farmers, extract it, and then able to use that to communicate with the system for the global supply chains to see to have that visibility of what is happening between
those two stakeholders.
Yes. So essentially, that is what MapMe does. We just connect the food companies to the farmers for easy communication, easy tracking, and easy traceability.
I see. Since starting in 2021, MapMe, what's the biggest impact that you've seen over the past 4 years?
Well, a couple. But then I think one of our greatest achievement is how the companies that we started as a pilot. So we started as a pilot. For the fun of it, right? For the passion and all that. So essentially we're like, well, this is the idea we have. It may be wild, but we really want to try it out. And some of the companies were very pessimistic because they were like, look, even Microsoft hasn't solved this. We are using, and some of them had platform that they were using. Some of them were using Oracle. Some were using Microsoft products. Some were even using certain bespoke ERP software like SAP and all that. But they still hadn't been able to crack the code. So they were like, what makes you a tiny company come here and then with this big balls to, do this? So we challenged them that, look, just test it out. Try it. So they used it for 6 months. And just after that, 2 of them decided, okay, we are going to pay you for this. So I think that was one of the things that helped us to validate the idea. So for us, it was a big thing because back to the analogy, if you do the right thing, if you follow the right tree, if you climb the right tree, you get the support. So somehow we climbed the right tree and we got the support that we deserved. Now, fast forward, I think one of the second thing that we are very happy and passionate and very proud of is that we've been able to move to another country. So one of the companies referred us to a partner company in Rwanda. And we had just started, we were just technically 3 years because when we started, the first year was more like product testing and prototyping and all that. So we technically went full scale to work with these companies somewhere 2022. So from 2022, 2023, 2024, I was more or less like trying to optimize, trying to, work with these partners to get feedback, etc. And so for them to refer us to another company outside Ghana or outside where we were located was a big deal for us. It really made us feel that, okay, I think we are going international. We are going outside our comfort zone to understand the operations in another country, So I would say that's been a very big opportunity and a very big milestone for us. And through that, we intend to penetrate the East African market.
That's there. We have I'll give you I'll say, for example, for my end as a Ugandan, I think it's up north of 90% of our land is arable land.
Perfect.
And there's so many farms. Agriculture, I believe, is our biggest sector, with coffee being our biggest sort of export in the country in terms of the agricultural scene. So who knows, maybe
yes,
after this conversation, that might be a conversation that we can potentially have.
Absolutely.
But before I sort of speak about the vision that you have now for MapMate, you mentioned something that I think is very important for entrepreneurs. And I wanted to talk about it because it sparked a lot of thoughts in my mind regarding you created a solution using blockchain, but when you tried to implement it, it was rejected. You then decided, okay, I need to go be in the lives of the farmers for 3 to 6 months, essentially living with them, learning from them. My question is, how important is it to go and be with the people you're trying to create a solution for, so you co-create the idea instead of simply sitting in your office, in your home, in the luxury of your and the comfort of your life, and then creating something for people you have not met? How important is it as an entrepreneur for you to go co-create with the people that you're trying to create a solution for before you come up with this idea?
Yeah, I think it's very important that as an entrepreneur, you need to understand the reality. You see, that's why I was saying that there's a difference between passion and value. One key thing in entrepreneurship is understanding the pain points of your client. And you can't understand the pain points of anyone unless you share the pain with them. Let me give you a very classic example. If you look at how there was a movie that I watched. It's called Padman, I guess. Now, this is a movie that tells the story of one Indian young guy whose wife was suffering from, I think, like whose wife was on her period, and he didn't understand why, when it comes to that, they have to separate the wife from him. He doesn't need to touch the wife. And he felt like this was so bad because it was more or less like dehumanizing, women within the locality he was coming from. To the extent that he tested ways of coming up with a pad for the wife. And it resulted in so many issues, from cultural issues where he was seen as a lunatic in a village, etc. But then this guy decided to push, left the community because he was literally banished because of that. I mean, he was creating a whole lot of, and he was daring because he really wanted to solve that problem for his wife. He understood the pain. And that is essentially what entrepreneurship is. You can't solve a problem you don't understand. If you don't understand a problem, well, you may do a good guess, but then it might not be sustainable. If you want to have a sustainable business or be a sustainable entrepreneur, you need to understand the problem thoroughly. And the catchword is thoroughly. You need to be thorough with the problem. So that's why, for me, we always try to understand the problem right from the get-go. We decided to take time. It took us a couple of years to really, really understand the problem. And so in the entrepreneurial journey, one thing that sometimes I see most startups that start and sometimes are not able to, reach is that they sometimes make the passion overtake the value. Sometimes the client or the users may not necessarily need all the fancy stuff. They just need that particular problem solved, and that's it for them.
That's it for them.
Yeah. But then you may do a lot of cosmetics, I call, but you may do a lot of things that somehow has a lot of features. But then at the end of the day, they become needless features. So it is important that you need to understand the problem. Recently, I don't know whether you heard about 23andMe. 23andMe is a company, a biotech company, and they are facing so much problems and all that. One of the challenges that they face is the users. Right now, the users' data is up for sale, which is a big deal, right? And that happens when, you don't co-create with your users. At the end of the day, if this was made, if the users were aware of this and they co-created this with them, trust me, they would have been able to find a way of getting this to, or even making sure that their data was sort of preserved or something. So generally what I'm saying is that it is really crucial that as an entrepreneur, you need to understand the problem space thoroughly. If you don't understand the problem space really well, you might not be able to sustain, because the problem space is always dynamic. It's always changing. But then if you are able to understand it right from the onset, you are always able to adjust your operations to fit the problem space as you grow. Yeah.
And okay, looking at that now, let's imagine we're on a journey. You have gone, you have created, you've co-created with the clients or the potential clients that you intend to solve. Now you have an idea of what they need. You have been lucky enough to be in an ecosystem such as Waterloo Kitchener that helps founders, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs thrive. How important has being in an ecosystem been for you to taking your idea from simply a concept now into reality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think you can't survive alone. There is always this, I don't know whether it's a proverb or it's a saying that if you're going to go fast, go alone. But even if you want to go far, you need to go with a team, or you need to go with, you need to have like someone. So having an ecosystem gives you the tenacity to survive for long. So being part of the Waterloo Kitchener business ecosystem, for me, sparks the thirst and the energy to push every time, because I always get encouraged by the startups, the companies, people who are breaking barriers, who are going beyond. I see female entrepreneurs doing crazy things. I see young and old entrepreneurs doing so many things. I see age not being a barrier. I see ethnic background not being a barrier. I see gender not being a barrier. I see, race not being a barrier, and that encourages me a lot to see that, all these things can't be an excuse, right, to grow your idea. So that helps a lot to, that was one thing that sort of encouraged me to transform my idea and grow it to where it is now. I remember when I came somewhere 2023, September, and the first time I met my supervisor and we were talking, and then I told him that, hey, I have this idea. He was like, tell me, I want to hear more about it. I told him and he was like, I think you need to meet someone. That was the very first time I met my professor, and that's what he told me. So that tells how fertile the ecosystem is. So right from the time I came, that very term, I was introduced to Velocity, Greenhouse, Problem Lab. I was introduced to all the ecosystems available within just the first 2 months or the first month. I was so new, I had no clue what was happening around me. But then, that same time, I applied for the Velocity pitch, went to pitch, and won. Now, that, for me, clearly tells the fertility of the business ecosystem here. That it doesn't matter how long you've been here or how soon, or you could pivot if you just put yourself in it, in the ecosystem. So it is really important that we understand the resources that we can leverage on as a youth, we can leverage on as individuals. They're out there. It is, by extension, not only in Waterloo Kitchener. I mean, there are so many online, like what Young and Restless is doing now. I mean, this is an opportunity that people can listen to, draw some inspiration, and learn how to grow their ideas. So I feel like there are so many resources and opportunities around us in this age that can really empower us to transform our ideas. So it's always important to appreciate the people around you, appreciate the resources around you, and take advantage of them. And the last thing I'll just quickly add is you really need to learn how to give back and how to learn from others. I learn a lot from others, from mentors to peers to even people I mentor or my mentees, to people I teach in class, to everyone. Because there is this rich experience built when you try to learn from everyone, from so many cultures, from so many backgrounds. It kind of elevates your confidence. It elevates your abilities to learn more. Now, for example, I joined a salsa class just for fun, but then it really taught me a lot of things. It made me understood the Latin culture. It made me understood, oh, so this is how, these people, this is the culture behind this. It may be just a dance, but it comes with some culture, something that you can learn from, And indirectly, you realize that you become well-grounded if you want to, grow your idea, if you want to connect with people, it build your confidence when it comes to networking, so all these things matter. It kind of builds in you so many opportunities to learn and, take some skill that you might probably not learn anywhere. Yeah.
Anyway. And as we sort of continue this conversation, I'm learning a lot from you and your experience. But
Yeah, thank you.
What is your vision for Mapmate 10 years from now?
10 years from now, we really want to have, I call, a tailored experience for farmers. Now, this may sound simple, but then given the complexity across the world when it comes to working with food supply chains, it will take some time. Now, understanding people's behavior and people's way of life is really, really complex. Today, you may take coffee for breakfast, but then the likelihood for you to start changing to tea or changing to oatmeal or changing to cereal in the next few days is really high. I mean, the human life or the human behavior is very, very dynamic and complex. There are so many things that contributes to why we make decisions and why we do certain things that we do, right? So we are still on a journey of understanding the market, understanding the supply chain, understanding the end users. And over time, we really want to build a system that is so robust that can literally tell the next activity of the farmer, the next activity of the user, so that by extension, it helps the whole world in two ways. One, it helps us to combat climate change because climate change happens when the variability of humans keeps becoming complex, right? The reason why the ozone layer has been depleted, etc., is because of the consumption, because of fossil fuels, because of all these things that are happening. And it's also because it is difficult to predict. It is difficult to understand why certain things happen the way it is. Because if you understand it, that's when you can find solutions to it and then mitigate it and then save the planet, right? So the reason why maybe some farmers may use certain unorthodox approaches to do their farming, maybe they be cutting down the trees or causing deforestation, burning bushes, using, various inorganic or various chemicals in their water for fishing or for farming or whatever. The reason why they may be doing all these things may not only be a social problem. It may not only be an economic problem. It may not only be an environmental problem. There are so many dynamics. There are so many perspectives. There are so many things that contributes to that. Yeah. So it's always important to understand those dynamics and then build over time a model that can put together every piece that can be able to sort of model out the behavior and the patterns over time. So at the end of the day, we want MapMate to be able to guide the decision levels of both companies and farmers in a way that is more impactful, more sustainable, and more economically viable. So imagine having a system or a platform that you don't only, as a company, you don't only get access to how many raw material, how many bags you are getting. You are not able to tell, it doesn't only tell you that, but it tells you precisely, and the word is precisely. It tells you the kind of quality you should expect in the next 6 months. It tells you the rates of flow in terms of materials that you should expect. It tells you, it calculates for you the amount of CO2s that has been emitted based on the activities that the farmers have used on the farm. It tells you essentially the extent of farming in terms of harvest that the farmers have gone within the past few weeks. All these things are things that then can help you make a tailored decision. Because if you want to support farmers, you may not necessarily, you can't support farmers generally. There's some support you can give them generally, but then farmers may have specific needs. So how can you support female farmers? How can you support male farmers? How can you support young farmers? How can you support old farmers? How can you support, and all these categories of farmers have different patterns, different motivations, different stages of their farming, and it only takes a system that has been built over time to be able to give solution to this tailored kind of needs. So it's more or less like having a companion that helps to understand the farmers and give you precise support to both the farmers and the companies. And that is essentially where we want to get to.
That's a big vision, and I do know it's going to work out.
Yeah.
My last question to you is, as we wrap up our great conversation today, is if you could speak to 20-year-old you all those years back, what would you tell him and why?
Well, I'll just tell the 20-year-old Kwaku that it's good you never give up and never give up. Never stop learning and always be kind to yourself. I think sometimes a lot of people, look back and then they're like, oh, I felt like I should have done this way or should have done this that way. Personally, I don't really agree to that because of my values. I believe that whatever that I did and whatever that I do is always for a reason and it always has a purpose. Even if it was a mistake, it needed to happen so that I learn from that and then grow. So for me, whether they are mistakes or not, they all work together for good. Like they all come together to achieve a common goal. And so if I should go back, I wouldn't change any part of whatever decisions that I made because they all contributed to who I am now. And I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And so I'll just tell my 20 young self that, look, don't be too hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Keep on learning and keep on, growing and keep on sharing with others. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kwaku, for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate your insights and all the advice that you have shared. I know from your extensive experience, I've been able to see that you have drawn lessons, but not just drawn lessons, but you have applied them. And your application now is going beyond just your organizations, but speaking to young people, advising them, talking to them, and using your experiences as a vessel for them to learn and see how best to align their work. Thank you very much for being.
Thank you so much, Darren. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story. And then, I mean, it's been awesome. I was looking forward to this, and I'm also learning, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for those people watching, thank you very much for tuning in. As Kwaku's story has shared, and the advice that he has given, never give up on yourself. Always be kind to yourself. I know many of us are on this journey, really trying our best to achieve great things. There's a lot of comparison happening. But like I always say, once you understand what your purpose is, you'll be able to take the journey with a lot of poise and a lot of understanding of where you need to go. Kwaku has mentioned right from the beginning with the proverb that he said that if you are climbing the right tree, people will naturally gravitate to you, support you, and go with you on that journey. If you're climbing the wrong tree, sometimes, yes, they will start off by supporting you, but eventually they'll realize that this is not the right tree because, again, the values and the motivations behind what you're doing are faulty, and that is something that you need to check within yourself and understand. So thank you again, Kwaku. Thank you, everyone, for listening, watching. Continue to share the podcast as more episodes come out. We do appreciate all your support and all your feedback. Thank you. Take care, and we'll see you soon.